I never imagined it would happen to me. The moment I found out my brother had stolen my inheritance, I felt like the ground had been ripped from beneath me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the betrayal, the trust that had been broken. I had always considered Noah my closest family member, someone who understood me better than anyone else. But when I saw the bank statement and realized what he'd done, my world shattered. He had convinced our parents to give him control of the will after they passed, claiming he would handle everything. I never questioned it. After all, he was my brother, and I trusted him completely. But I never saw the signs. He'd been playing a dangerous game, one where I was unknowingly the victim. When I first saw the large deposit in his bank account, I tried to brush it off, but then the receipts started to pile up. New cars, expensive vacations, and a sudden lifestyle change that was hard to ignore. Noah, who had always been a careful spender, was now living like he had no worries in the world. I thought back to the last few months, and everything started making sense. He'd been acting differently, more distant, more secretive. I knew something wasn't right, but I never expected this. My own flesh and blood had taken what was mine, all while pretending everything was fine. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I wasn't about to let him get away with this. I had worked hard for everything I had, and I wasn't about to lose it all to his greed. It wasn't long before I started my own investigation. I knew I needed to be careful. Noah had a way of making people believe his lies. But I wasn't like him. I didn't jump into things rashly. I quietly collected evidence, starting with bank statements, old emails, and receipts I found tucked away in his office. Everything pointed to one simple truth. Noah had transferred my inheritance into his own account. He had stolen it. I didn't confront him right away. I wasn't going to give him a chance to cover his tracks. I contacted a lawyer and started getting the necessary documents together. Noah thought he had won, but he had no idea what I was planning. As the weeks passed, I kept my emotions in check, knowing I needed to stay calm and composed. I watched Noah live his new life, seemingly oblivious to the fact that I was quietly working behind the scenes. Every time I found a new piece of evidence, I felt a surge of satisfaction. He had been so careless, so confident that I would never notice, that I was always too trusting. It made me realize how easy it was for him to manipulate people, especially someone like me who had always believed the best in him. But now I had the upper hand. I wasn't just going to let him take everything and walk away unscathed. I'd been preparing for this moment for months, and I was ready to make my move. The day I confronted him came sooner than I expected. It was a strange feeling, standing there in front of him, knowing exactly what he'd done and watching him think he was still in control. He looked at me with that same smug expression he always had, as if nothing had changed. "You're overreacting, Madison," he said, his voice full of false reassurance. "It was just a misunderstanding. You know I'd never take something from you." I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just let the silence hang in the air. I pulled out the documents I had gathered, each one proving his guilt. The bank transfers, the receipts, the emails, all of it laid out before him. His face went pale as he realized the truth was out. But even then, he tried to deny it, to play the victim. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is. We're family, Madison. You can't do this." His voice cracked, but I wasn't moved. "You took what wasn't yours," I said, my voice steady. "And now you're going to face the consequences." What happened next was something I hadn't expected. Noah tried to cover his tracks by using every excuse in the book. He said he didn't mean to do it, that he had intended to give it back. But I had proof, and it was undeniable. I didn't let him manipulate me any longer. I contacted my lawyer, and together we filed for legal action. The first court hearing came quickly, and Noah walked in with that same arrogant expression, still thinking he could talk his way out of it, but his confidence was gone. The judge listened to my lawyer as we presented the evidence, every document, every piece of proof that Noah had stolen from me. He thought he could bluff his way through it, but the law wasn't on his side. As the hearing continued, I watched Noah's demeanor change. His smugness began to crack, replaced by fear. He had no escape, no way out. The truth was catching up to him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The final judgment was a crushing blow to Noah. Not only did he have to return everything he had taken, but he was also held liable for all the legal fees. It was over. The inheritance was rightfully mine, and I had won. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about taking back what he had stolen from me. Not just the inheritance, but my trust and my peace of mind. As I walked out of the courthouse, I could hear him shouting behind me, but I didn't turn around. I knew he was done, and for the first time in months, I felt free. In the weeks that followed, Noah tried everything he could to get out of the hole he had dug for himself. He sent me a few apologetic messages, claiming that he was sorry for what he had done, and that he'd never meant for things to go this far. But I wasn't fooled. The damage was already done, and his words meant nothing to me. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Not just at him, but at myself for ever trusting him in the first place. It hurt more than anything to realize that my own brother could take advantage of me in such a cold, calculating way. But I wasn't going to let him break me. If anything, it made me more determined to move forward and rebuild. I focused on my career, my life, and everything I had worked so hard to achieve. What Noah didn't realize was that his theft had sparked something in me. It wasn't just about getting back what was mine. It was about proving that I could rise above it all. While he was struggling to get back on his feet, I was taking my life in a new direction. I started making plans for the future, something I had put off for so long, always assuming that my family would be there to help me along the way. I wasn't waiting around for anyone anymore. The more I pushed forward, the more I realized just how much I had underestimated my own strength. Noah, on the other hand, quickly found that the world wasn't as forgiving as he had hoped. His social media posts painted a picture of a man who had it all together, but the truth was far from that. The more he tried to show off his new life, the more he slipped up. It wasn't long before rumors started spreading, and it became clear to everyone that Noah had burned all his bridges. Friends stopped returning his calls, and even the people who had once supported him started distancing themselves. The few who still stuck by him were only there because they had something to gain from his fall. As for me, I found that people began to respect me more than ever. The news of what Noah had done spread, and slowly, the story became less about a brother's betrayal and more about how I handled it. It was as if people finally saw me for who I really was, someone who could stand up for herself, who could fight back and win. My business started to grow, not just because of the inheritance, but because people admired my strength. They wanted to support me, to be a part of something real. And that meant everything to me. In the midst of all this, I received an unexpected visit from Noah's ex-girlfriend, Rachel. She had left him soon after the news about his theft came out. She was no longer the starry-eyed girl who thought she could change him. When we sat down together, she apologized for not believing me sooner. I thought he was different, she admitted. But then I saw how he treated you, and I realized it wasn't just the inheritance. It was his whole attitude. He always thought he could take whatever he wanted without any consequences. I looked at her, feeling a little bit of sympathy for the woman who had been just as fooled as I had been. "It's not your fault," I said. "He's good at making people believe whatever he wants them to, but the truth always comes out." She nodded, her eyes filled with regret. "I know now," she said softly. "I just wish I'd seen it sooner." As I continued to rebuild my life, Noah's life seemed to spiral. The company he had been working for let him go after his reputation took a hit. He had been living beyond his means, and now he was paying the price. I heard that he was living in a small apartment, barely able to afford the rent, and working a job that barely covered his bills. The lavish lifestyle he had once flaunted had been reduced to nothing, and yet he still couldn't bring himself to admit that it was his own choices that had led to this downfall. One day, I received a text from him. It was brief, just a few words, but it hit me hard. "I never meant for things to go like this, Madison. I was wrong." I stared at the message for a long time, not sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to reach out and tell him that I forgave him, that maybe one day we could rebuild our relationship. But then I remembered everything he had taken from me. It wasn't just the inheritance, it was trust, and that was something I couldn't give back so easily. I didn't respond. Instead, I went back to what I knew best, moving forward. Months passed, and life started to feel normal again. In fact, It felt better than normal. I had my focus back, and for the first time in a long time, I was able to look ahead without constantly worrying about what my brother had done. The inheritance was restored, my business was thriving, and I felt a sense of control that I hadn't known in years. Every time I walked into my office, I felt proud of what I had built. I had done it all on my own, without anyone's help, and certainly without Noah's betrayal holding me back. But even though I had moved on, I still couldn't shake the thought of my brother. The reality of what he had done to me, and the way he thought he could just take everything and walk away without facing the consequences, still lingered in the back of my mind. I'd often wonder how things could have been different if he hadn't been so blinded by greed. I thought about how many chances I had given him, how many times I had put my trust in him, only to have it thrown back in my face. Then one day, I received an unexpected call. It was from Noah's lawyer. At first, I thought it might be some sort of mistake. Maybe Noah had decided to come crawling back, trying to make amends in his own way. But no, it was much worse than that. Noah had filed for an appeal, attempting to overturn the court's decision and reclaim the inheritance. He was desperate, clutching at anything he could to regain what he had lost. His lawyer tried to convince me that he had made a mistake, and that he was simply trying to correct it. They claimed he was under a lot of pressure and had learned his lesson, but I wasn't buying it. Noah hadn't learned anything. This was just another attempt to take what wasn't his. I couldn't believe he had the nerve to go down this road again. It was almost laughable. I had thought this was all behind me, that Noah had learned the hard way, but no, he was still trying to play the victim. His arrogance hadn't changed. I remember sitting at my desk, hearing his lawyer talk about family reconciliation, and I just shook my head. There would be no reconciliation, not after everything he had done. This wasn't about family anymore. It was about his ego and his refusal to accept the consequences of his actions. I immediately called my lawyer and prepared for the fight ahead. This time, I wasn't going to let him off the hook. I had learned everything I needed to about standing my ground, and I wasn't going to let Noah drag me into his mess again. I gathered all the evidence once more, going over everything meticulously. The court had already made its decision, but this new challenge meant I had to be even more thorough. The appeal came and went, but Noah's arguments crumbled under the weight of the truth. He had no defense, no real excuse for what he had done. The judge dismissed his claims without hesitation, stating that his actions were not just irresponsible. They were criminal. As his last hope slipped away, Noah's demeanor began to shift. The confidence he had once worn like armor was gone, replaced by the realization that this was the end. There was no way out, no quick fix. His reputation, what was left of it, had been destroyed. He had no one left to turn to, and his appeal had only pushed him further into a corner. In the end, Noah was forced to pay additional court fees on top of the original settlement. He had tried to fight, to manipulate, to win back what he had stolen, but he only ended up digging himself deeper. Watching it all unfold, I felt a sense of finality. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about showing him that he couldn't take what was mine. I had fought for what I deserved, and I had won. As I looked back, I realized that it wasn't just the inheritance that mattered in the end. It was the lessons I had learned along the way, the importance of trust, the value of being vigilant, and the power of standing up for yourself, even when it seems like the world is against you. Noah's actions had tried to tear me down, but instead, they had made me stronger. I had rebuilt my life on my terms, and nothing could take that away from me. Noah's life, however, continued its downward spiral. He never fully recovered from the damage he had caused. I heard from mutual friends that he had trouble holding down a steady job, and that his attempts at starting a new business had failed miserably. He was still chasing something, anything to restore the life he had once flaunted, but it was too late. No amount of money or material things could fix what he had broken. As for me, I moved on, more determined than ever to live life on my own terms. My business flourished, my relationships grew stronger, and every day I felt more at peace with the decisions I had made. I had taken control of my destiny, and no one, not even Noah, could take that away from me. Life had a funny way of working out. What he thought was his victory had become my triumph, and in the end, it was a reminder that sometimes the best revenge is simply living your life better than they ever thought possible. Years passed, and the story of Noah's betrayal slowly faded into the background of my life. The business kept growing, thriving in ways I hadn't even imagined back when everything fell apart. I had expanded into new markets, and people who once doubted me, friends, family, even strangers, began to recognize my name. I'd done it all without Noah, without anyone who had ever tried to bring me down. And every day, as I walked into my office, I was reminded of just how far I'd come. The weight of his betrayal had long since been lifted, replaced by the pride of knowing that I had built something real, something lasting. But then, one day, out of the blue, I received a letter. It was from my lawyer, which immediately made my heart race. I opened it cautiously, not sure what to expect. The letter informed me that Noah had filed yet another legal claim, this time over the remaining family assets, things he believed he was entitled to despite everything that had already happened. My first instinct was to laugh. Had he really not learned his lesson? It seemed like every few months, Noah found some new way to try and take what wasn't his. But this time was different. This time, the letter wasn't about money. It was about something even more personal, our family home. Noah was claiming that he was entitled to part of the family property, a place that had been in our family for generations. He argued that since he was still technically listed as a beneficiary in some of the documents, he had a right to a share of it. I couldn't believe it. He was still trying to push for something that had never belonged to him in the first place. This wasn't just about the inheritance anymore. It was about a legacy, our family's history, our roots. And he thought he could just waltz in and claim it? I knew I had to act quickly. I gathered all the paperwork, all the evidence I had kept over the years, every document that proved my ownership of the property, my rights as the sole heir. The thought of Noah once again trying to take something from me filled me with anger. But more than that, it filled me with a deep sense of resolve. He had tried to ruin my life once, but he wasn't going to do it again. The court hearing came faster than I had expected. This time, Noah seemed even more desperate than before. He had no real argument, just the same old lies and manipulations, trying to convince the judge that he was entitled to something he had no right to. But this time, I wasn't just defending my inheritance. I was defending everything I had worked for, everything that had made me who I was today. I had learned from the past, and this time, I wouldn't let him get away with it. When I took the stand, I didn't hold back. I laid out every detail of what had happened, how he had stolen the inheritance, how he had tried to manipulate me and everyone around him. I showed the judge the evidence I had carefully kept, and I spoke about the years of hard work, the sacrifices I had made to protect what was rightfully mine. The more I spoke, the more I realized just how much I had grown. The woman sitting in front of the judge wasn't the same person I had been when I first found out about Noah's betrayal. I had become someone stronger, someone who knew how to stand her ground and fight for what she deserved. When the judge made the ruling, I felt a sense of relief that was almost overwhelming. Noah's claim was dismissed without question. He had no legal ground to stand on. The family property, my inheritance, everything I had built, it was all mine. For the first time, I truly felt like the chapter of my life with Noah was closed. There would be no more battles, no more claims. He was finally out of my life for good. But the satisfaction didn't last long. After the hearing, I received a call from Noah's mother. She sounded upset, almost desperate, as she asked if I could help Noah, if I could offer him some kind of second chance. She claimed he had hit rock bottom and that he was asking for forgiveness. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to feel sympathy for him, but the other part of me knew better. He had made his choices, and I had made mine. I was done trying to fix things that he had broken. I told her calmly but firmly, "It's over, I've moved on." And with that, I hung up. Noah's downfall had been inevitable. In the years that followed, I heard from mutual acquaintances that he had tried a few times to start over. New jobs, new relationships, new ventures, but nothing ever seemed to stick. The man who once thought he was invincible was now just another cautionary tale. He'd lost his family, his reputation, and any real chance at rebuilding his life. He had tried to tear me down, but all he had done was set me on the path to success. He thought he could break me, but in the end, he had only made me stronger. As for me, I continued to build my empire. The boutique chain grew even more successful, and I expanded into luxury accessories. My name became synonymous with resilience and business savvy, and I began to receive invitations to speak at conferences, to share my story with others. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the success story. I had turned everything Noah had tried to take from me into the foundation of my own success. And every time I looked at my growing business, I was reminded of just how far I had come. Noah tried reaching out once more, sending a message telling me how much he regretted his actions. But this time, I didn't even bother reading it. There was nothing left to say. His attempts to manipulate me were over. I had learned everything I needed to know about him. And in the end, I had come out on top. Success was the best revenge, and I had proved that in ways Noah would never understand. A year after the final court ruling, I found myself standing at the grand opening of my 5th boutique location, surrounded by friends, employees, and well-wishers. The space was beautiful, modern, bright, and filled with the kind of energy I had always envisioned for my business. But what made the night even more special was the recognition. It wasn't just about the success of my boutique chain, it was about the journey I had taken to get here. A journey that had started with betrayal, but had led to something far greater than I could have ever imagined. As the evening unfolded, I noticed familiar faces from the past, people who had once doubted me or stayed silent when I needed support. Now they were here, showing up to celebrate my success. It felt good to see how far I had come, not just in terms of my business, but in terms of personal growth. I wasn't the same person I had been when Noah first betrayed me. I had learned to trust my instincts, to be strong in the face of adversity, and to never let anyone dictate my worth. Amid the celebration, I noticed an unfamiliar face in the crowd. It was a woman who seemed to be watching me from across the room. She looked slightly out of place, dressed in a simple outfit that didn't match the glamour of the event. When she caught my eye, she walked over, her expression a mixture of uncertainty and sincerity. "I don't know if you remember me," she said quietly, "but I'm Rachel. I was with Noah before all of this happened." I paused for a moment, surprised, but then I remembered her. She had been part of his life when everything had started to fall apart, and I had no idea how she had ended up here at my opening. I gave her a polite smile and gestured toward a quieter corner of the room. We sat down, and she took a deep breath before speaking again. "I wanted to apologize," she began, her voice soft, "for everything. I believed Noah when he said that you were the problem, that you were the one who was greedy and controlling. I didn't know what was really happening behind the scenes, but when everything went down and I saw how he treated you, how he manipulated everyone around him, I realized how wrong I had been. I listened, not interrupting. Rachel seemed genuine, remorseful even, but I wasn't sure how much I could really trust her. "You don't have to apologize," I said after a moment. "You weren't the one who hurt me. Noah is the one who made those choices." Rachel nodded, her eyes sad. "I know, but I should have seen through him. I should have understood that he was using me the same way he used everyone else. He always made himself out to be the victim, but I see now that he's the one who's destroyed everything." I studied her for a moment, feeling a strange mix of sympathy and relief. She wasn't trying to get back into my life. She was just being honest, and there was something about that honesty that made me feel better. I had spent so much time focusing on Noah, on what he had done to me, that I had almost forgotten what it felt like to be surrounded by people who weren't trying to take advantage of me. Rachel wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was simply acknowledging the past, and for the first time in a long time, I realized that I didn't need to carry the weight of that past anymore. "It's okay," I said, offering her a small smile. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them." Rachel gave a shaky laugh. "I'm still learning, but seeing you here, doing all of this, it's inspiring. You didn't let him break you. You came out stronger, and that's something I'm trying to do too." We talked for a few more minutes, and before she left, she gave me one final apology. "I hope you can find peace with everything that happened," she said, and I nodded. I didn't need her apology, not really. What I needed was to move forward, and I had done just that. Noah's manipulation, his betrayal, all of it had been part of a past I was no longer tied to. I had taken that pain and turned it into something that was mine, something that couldn't be taken from me. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter, congratulations, and a few speeches about the future of the business. But as the last guest trickled out and the lights dimmed, I found myself standing alone in the quiet of the new boutique, looking around at the empty space. It was everything I had worked for. The walls, the floor, the displays, they were all part of a dream that was now a reality. And more than that, they were a symbol of my strength, my perseverance, and the lesson I had learned from everything Noah had put me through. I had made it, I had survived, and not only that, I had thrived. And as I locked the doors and turned off the lights, I realized that Noah's cruel actions had not defined me. They had only driven me to become something better, someone who would never let anyone diminish her worth again. Noah had tried to destroy me, but all he had done was set me on the path to success. And that success was mine to keep, forever. The years continued to pass, and life seemed to move forward with a steady rhythm I had never imagined possible after everything that had happened. My business was flourishing, expanding in ways I had once only dreamed of. What had started as a single boutique was now a brand with multiple locations, each one more successful than the last. I had become a symbol of strength, independence, and resilience, and people often came to me for advice on how to protect their businesses, their futures, and their hearts. I'd spent years working, building, and proving that I could thrive on my own, without anyone's help, least of all Noah's. But even as I enjoyed my success, a part of me couldn't help but wonder how Noah was doing. I had moved on, built a life that was mine, but every now and then, his name would cross my mind. I couldn't deny the history we shared, and a small part of me still hoped that maybe, just maybe, he would realize what he had done and try to make amends. I had learned to let go of the past, but there were moments when it felt like it still lingered, just out of reach. One evening, as I sat in my office reviewing some new plans for expansion, I received a phone call that caught me completely off guard. It was from Noah. I stared at the phone for a few moments, unsure whether I should pick up. After everything, why was he reaching out now? I could feel my heart start to race, and a familiar tension washed over me, but I pressed accept anyway. Madison, his voice was quiet, almost hesitant. It's me, Noah. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I know who it is, I replied, my voice calm but firm. I wasn't sure what he wanted or why he was calling now, but I wasn't about to let him catch me off guard. I know we haven't spoken in a long time, he began, and I've made a lot of mistakes. I've been thinking a lot about everything I did to you, and I just wanted to apologize. I was wrong, Madison. I know I can't undo what I've done, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I've lost everything because of my choices, and I'm trying to make things right. His words hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't the apology I had imagined, but it was enough. I could hear the genuine regret in his voice, but I also knew that words didn't change the past. They didn't undo the years of damage. I stayed silent for a moment, thinking carefully about how to respond. The anger, the hurt, it wasn't fresh anymore, but it was still there, buried deep inside me. I had moved on, yes, but that didn't mean I could just forget what he had done. I appreciate you calling, Noah, I finally said, my voice steady. But what's done is done. I've rebuilt my life, and I've found peace. I've let go of the past, and I'm not holding on to the bitterness anymore. I hope you can do the same. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him processing my words, trying to figure out what to say next. Finally, he spoke again, his voice quieter this time. I understand, he said. I don't expect anything from you. I just needed to say it. I wanted you to know I'm sorry. I know, I replied simply, but I've moved on, Noah, and you should too. We said our goodbyes, and I hung up the phone, a strange sense of closure settling over me. In that moment, I realized that this was the final step I needed. I had carried the weight of his betrayal for so long, but now I was truly free. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I had taken everything he tried to take from me and turned it into something stronger, something beautiful. And now, with that final apology, I could finally let it all go. As I sat there in my office, looking out the window at the city lights below, I felt a deep sense of peace. I had survived the worst, and in the process, I had become someone I could be proud of. Noah had underestimated me, and I had shown him and the world that nothing could break me. What he had tried to steal from me wasn't just money or property. It was my future, my happiness, my sense of self. And in the end, I had taken it all back. Noah might have thought he could destroy me, but in reality, he had only set me on the path to something greater. And now, as I looked ahead, I knew that nothing would ever stop me from building the life I wanted. It was mine to shape, mine to create. And as the years went on, I continued to grow, stronger, wiser, and more successful than ever before. Success had been my revenge, and it had been sweeter than I ever imagined.